I'm back. Hi folks, did you miss me? I'm back. So you're probably wondering, Nikita, it's been like 2 months, 3 months, more like, it's almost end of September. Where have you been? There hasn't been a new video, and yes, all of that is very true. But I'm back today with a new video, so let's talk today about where I've been, what I've been up to, and what I read over the summer. So it has been some time. If you're watching this video, thank you so much for coming back to the channel. I appreciate it. I decided to take the summer off of all of my creative projects more or less because I was struggling with my health quite a bit for 3 months. Still not out of the woods yet, but I am feeling like myself enough to come back on here and share with you everything that I read for the 3 months that I was hibernating. I certainly did keep up with my reading for sure. I just wasn't in the mood to film and edit and just put things out there because my health was taking up all of my bandwidth, really most if not all of my bandwidth. But I did continue to read because reading is something that has been a constant in my life, and it does help me feel, well, helps me escape, but also helps me feel a little bit more like myself. And so I did read, actually read a new kind of category of books that I haven't really read before, so I'll talk about that in a second. But I did continue to read, and I thought I read a lot more, but as I was prepping for this video and I went back and I looked at my Goodreads, it wasn't as much as I thought. But you know what? A lot of them were really, really lovely books, and a lot of them are 5 stars. So I certainly read a ton of fiction, like I usually do, a bit of romances, and a whole new category of books that people have been talking about for a long time, but I personally haven't really read. So if you want to know what that category is, stay tuned. I'm going to talk about it in just a second. All right, so these are the books that I read in the month of June, July, August, and now half of September. So I will have a September wrap up at the end of the month, but for now I will include most of the books that I have read in the month of September. So starting with June. June was when things got like really bad for me, and I didn't read too much, and I couldn't really connect too much with the books that I finished either. But one of the first books that I read was Every Time I Go on Vacation, Someone Dies. And most of these books actually that I read during the summer were on my Kobo and not necessarily hardback. So I had a good time like reconnecting with my Kobo and reading the books on here. So I read Every Time I Go on Vacation, Somebody Dies by Catherine Mack. I have never heard of this author before, and I just picked it up because the premise sounded lovely to me. This is a cozy mystery set in Italy and, well, Rome and the Amalfi Coast to be specific. And because I absolutely love Italy, I'm biased, I will pick up anything that's set in that country. I decided to pick this up. This is a cozy mystery. It's basically about an author who is going on this book tour to promote her existing books or her new book, and she writes a series, and what she wants to do is she wants to now kill off her main character, and all of that is fine until the person from whom the main character is inspired shows up on the trip, and there's a real threat to their danger. So there's a lot of quirky characters, there is good food in here, there's a lovely setting, and people trying to figure out what's going on without it necessarily being super thrilling. Looks like this is the first one in the series, so there are going to be more. I ended up giving this one a 4 stars, maybe a bit too generous of a rating, but at that time I really enjoyed it. It was a nice escape for me. After that, I read Till Heist Do Us Part by Sarah Desai. This is the second one in To Hold Into Heist series. Is that what it's called? To Have Into Heist series. This is exactly what it sounds. It's a heist book. This is a sequel of the first one, so you have to read the first one to understand because it's the same cast of characters and an extension of the plot. This was an arc provided This book was an arc provided to me by NetGalley. This was, I think, my first arc, or one of my first arcs, and it was such a cool milestone moment for me. I was so excited to read an arc and, give my review. So again, like my reviews are honest. I ended up giving this book 3.5 stars. I did not enjoy it as much as the first one because I think just the heist idea it kind of lost its novelty because it was more or less the same thing in the second book. But what I will say that is that it was really, really fast paced. It was really quite like twisty and like lots of plot twists. A diverse set of characters. You also have BIPOC representation. Sarah Desai is a South Asian American woman, and her main character is Simi, who's also Simi Chopra, I believe, who's a South Asian American woman as well. Again, female leads. You've got heists. It's sort of a cozy mystery too. Again, with cozy mysteries and heist novels and stories, I have found that you have to leave a bit of logic and realistic thinking at the door, and for your benefit, because then it's so much more fun to kind of go with the flow and get lost in the story. This book also had some fun banter between the main characters. I don't usually love every author's ability to do banter, but I enjoyed it in this one. The pacing was pretty good for me for the most part. There were a couple places where I wish things moved along a bit faster, but overall it was a fun read. If you're looking for a heist series, I would suggest this one and the first one in the series, because I don't read too many heists, but I like that this one had like a fun set of characters and really felt like quite relatable. You know, these are not like criminal masterminds. These are just normal people caught in really odd situations and trying to do a heist. Okay, after that I read Need Me by Tessa Bailey. I ended up giving this 3 stars, but I am now thinking about this and I don't know how I feel about this book anymore. So if you have been watching me for some time, you know I like my Tessa Bailey's, or at least some of her older books. I think they are fun, they're fast paced, and if you like spice, her books definitely have a lot of that. But this one, it just, I don't know. So this is basically about our main character. She is a 21-year-old college student, and it's about her and her relationship with a professor who is 25 years old. It's not a huge gap, I guess, in age, just 3 years. Or I believe she's 20 and he's 25, so like 5 years. But it's just that power dynamic that I don't enjoy. And Tessa Bailey certainly seems like a pretty good job in trying to not make this like an abusive control of power or a super cringe trope, but it just doesn't sit well with me. I don't know, it just doesn't sit well with me. Outside of that particular main romantic dynamic, I enjoyed like the side characters, I enjoyed the pacing, I enjoyed the storytelling for sure, but just I wish they weren't professor and student. So I don't know, I will let you kind of read it and make your own kind of opinion. I just wish it was maybe like a professor to professor or student to student, or you know what, if it was maybe even like a mature student, like say a doctorate student and a professor, right, who are the same age, maybe I think that would have felt easier to digest. I don't know, just my thoughts on that one. All right, after that I read Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, which is the 4th one. I have been rereading the Harry Potter series ever since I went to a Harry Potter trivia in March or February, and we lost so badly, and it was quite embarrassing because I have been a Potterhead for decades and I really pride myself on that. So, and I reread the books every year or so, not the entire series, but a couple books in the series every year. But after that I decided to reread the whole series. So I finished the 4th one. I also read the 5th one since then, and now I'm on the 6th one, which is the Half-Blood Prince. Obviously this doesn't need to be said, but it's like 5 stars every time. Harry Potter, 5 stars. And you know what's funny is that every time I read the Harry Potter series, I come back relating to something in it in a totally new way. I think anytime you can read it in any phase of life, in any stage of life, there is going to be something that's going to resonate with you that didn't before, or you may have more depth about something that you didn't, you just felt related to before, but now there's a whole new depth to it, and I absolutely loved it. I love it for that reason. Every time feels like this like lovely anticipation, and it's so easy to lose yourself in that Harry Potter world. It's great. Next up, I read The Rom-Commers by Catherine Center. This is her newest book. I absolutely love Catherine Center. Like, I love Hello Stranger. I love The Bodyguard. And I was very excited for this book. I will say I gave it a 4 stars at the end of it. Not like a super solid, enthusiastic 4 stars, but like it was very good. There was something about this book that just didn't wow me like a lot of her other books. The main female character was really quite lovable. The romance was also nice between them, but overall, I don't know, just her storytelling didn't have the same kind of like punch for me. So this is a story about Emma Wheeler, who wants to be a screenwriter, but she is really just like at home taking care of her chronically ill father. And then an opportunity comes up for her to go to LA and write a screenplay for a director or an actor who does very specific kinds of movies. And then there's like a romance that happens between the two of them. I think maybe this idea of or characters that are set in the Hollywood industry just feels really like far removed for me or from my reality. Maybe that's why I didn't connect with it. I have noticed that books about people writing like screenplays and whatnot, like and there's been a ton of those. It just doesn't like it. I like it, I enjoy it, but it doesn't connect with me on the same deeper level. But it was good. I will say it was not my favorite Catherine Center. I don't know what other people have said about this book online. I haven't seen too much about it yet, but I do know it's been really highly anticipated. I will still continue to pick up and read Catherine Center. She is like one of my favorite authors currently, and I really, really enjoy her work. Speaking of main characters who are screenwriters, the next book that I read is Nora Goes Off Script by Annabelle Monaghan. This has been on my Kobo for a year, or at least a few months, if not a year. And again, very similar premise. This is actually my first Annabelle Monaghan book. I had heard a lot about this author. She's had 3 books now. Her 3rd one came out this summer, and everybody on YouTube talks about her. I just never felt called to the book. So sometimes I'll buy books because I know at some point I will want to read it, just not right at that moment. So I definitely felt called to it. I picked it up and I'm so glad I did. I ended up giving this 4 stars and I really, really enjoyed it. It was such a pleasant surprise, and I will put Annabelle Monaghan in the same category as Catherine Center in terms of like the type of like writing style, prose, and storylines. This book is about Nora Vance. She is, again, a struggling screenwriter. She writes a lot of these like Netflix, like cringy, cheesy holiday movies or something like that. And she gets an opportunity to write something different. She does, goes viral, and now it's being turned into a movie, like a huge movie with, like a blockbuster cast and production budget. And the actor who's playing the character's role comes and lives with her because it's being filmed in her house. Oh, and sorry, did I also mention that the screenplay that she wrote is inspired by her own life, about her husband upping and leaving basically one day. And so she gets inspired by her own heartbreak and she writes a story about that, pretty much identical to her lived experience. And it makes her really popular. And this production crew moves into her home. She lives in this like very historical estate, and there's a romance between herself and the main actor. There were things about the male protagonist that didn't sit right with me. I will say he wasn't like my favorite fictional romantic interest, but I think that for me was overshadowed by all the other lovely things in the book. If you like books that are very quite light, easily read, if you like, Emily Henry, some of her earlier works like Beach Read, Book Lovers, stuff like that, if you like that type of writing style, if you like women's fiction, if you like contemporary fiction, I think you would really like Nora Goes Off Script and Annabelle Monaghan's other works, because I did read some of her other books, because it's very similar in the types of stories, the type of writing, the types of characters, the settings. Like, it just makes you feel so cozy. The romance isn't overbearing. There's a lot of personal development, and the story is quite character driven and also plot driven, but there's so much character growth and stuff that happens. And I just find, like, I find characters like this so relatable. So this was a really great book. And because I was really enjoying reading Annabelle Monaghan, I picked up her book that came out last year, which was Same Time Next Summer. This one was a little bit different. So I ended up giving this 4 stars as well, but this was a little bit different. Nora Goes Off Script had a female protagonist that was older. So she's like in her 30s, But Same Time Next Summer is about a teenager. And I liked it. I wasn't expecting this like younger cast of characters, because part of what made Nora Goes Off Script so relatable was just like the kids. She's older, she has kids, you know, she has like this like life, and I don't know, I think it's just a phase of life that I'm in. I find characters that are in their 30s and 40s and 50s a lot more relatable than, you know, in their 20s. But Same Time Next Summer was also really good. It's about these two friends who have grown up in Florida, I believe, like living next to each other in beach houses. And now it's been a few years, they haven't spoken for whatever reason. They had a falling out. We don't know why. We find out later. And our main character, the female main character, she's getting married. And so she wants to come back and get married in that area. So she comes back for the summer with her fiance, and her guy best friend that she grew up with, that she no longer talks to, they get reconnected. And things happen from there. Again, super fast paced, left me with a lovely feeling of anticipation. It was really quite well done. And even though it was a younger cast of characters, the plot still felt quite mature. You know, the third act misunderstanding was not like a stupid, like, you know, miscommunication. It was something a little bit more deeper. Okay, so next up, I picked up a new category of books that I haven't before, and I have wanted to, and a lot of people talk about it on YouTube, but I finally did it, and that is graphic novels. If any of you have read any graphic novels, let me know. It was my first time. I mean, I obviously grew up reading comics like Calvin and Hobbes and Archie's, and I have Hyperbole and a Half as well, but I was not new. I mean, I was not too familiar with graphic novels, so I decided to pick up Heartstopper series, and oh my gosh, the hype is real. The hype is real. 5-star series. I think I binged all 4 in like a week. They happened to be available from my library on my Kobo, and I just borrowed them like one after another, and they were so lovely. I was a bit skeptical going in because it was a new format for me, which is a graphic novel, and then it's also a story about 2 queer adolescent boys trying to find like, you know, like love and navigate their identity and sexuality. And so I was like, okay, like, is this gonna be relatable? But it was so good. I am totally in love with Nick and Charlie. I think I understand what the hype is about. So I read the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and the 5th. The 6th one comes out this year or next year, and I can't wait to have it. I'm going to be buying this entire series and putting it on my bookshelf. If you're in a bit of a reading slump, I will say, or you want to try reading something a little bit different, so something that still has quite a bit of depth to it, but it's, you know, visually striking and it's not super time consuming, I would suggest picking up Heartstopper series, especially any graphic novel, but especially Heartstopper series, because even though it's about 2 teenage boys, the themes are, you know, can be a little bit triggering, so look up trigger warnings, but the themes are so mature. There's so much depth to their journey, and Alice Osman has shared the story in such a fun, lighthearted, relatable way while still touching on some of these deeper topics. All right, next up, I have 2 DNFs, and it makes me really, really sad because I was quite excited about these. The first DNF is Lies and Weddings by Kevin Kwan. Kevin Kwan is the author of Crazy Rich Asians trilogy. I loved Crazy Rich Asians. I read the first 2 in that series. So nice. I had it was a hoot, like, reading them. But this series, no, I think I got through, 45%, and I had to put it down because it just did not, the premise was really nice. So Lies and Weddings is about, again, you know, like super affluent Chinese origin characters. It's about our main character. She is part of the British aristocracy. She is a daughter of a lord, and it's like that family. She's a daughter of an earl, and it follows that family where she's half white and half Asian. and she's getting married, and the wedding is in Hawaii, and there's like a volcano eruption that happens, so it's fun. Like the summary really drew me to it. What kind of just really got to me over time was just, in the story there was this much plot and this much just mentions of brands and what everybody's wearing, and like how branded these plates are, and look at that car, or look at those pants, or look at those shoes. And I understand the author needed to do that in order to really show the wealth and the lifestyle of the characters, because and that was his style of writing as well in Crazy Rich Asians, but I felt like I had no capacity for that this time. Like it just kept going on and on and on, and half of these brands, I don't know, and it was just every other sentence was how branded this spoon is, or this plate is, or this shoe, or this car. Like it just, there was not enough plot movement or character movement. There was just all of this extra stuffing of brands, and that really took away from the plot and the story, in my opinion, because the story was excellent. There's romance in it as well, and like I love his way of showing this like cultural dynamics between like Asian parents and children, and I love all of that, which is what I really loved about Crazy Rich Asians. But Lies and Weddings did not do it for me. I also have his other book, Sex and Vanity. I'm a little bit scared to pick it up, and maybe I will at some point, but sadly this was a no for me. But I still really enjoy, I really recommend Crazy Rich Asians. The second DNF really broke my heart. I did not want to DNF this book, but the second one was The Unlikely Adventures of Sherrill Sisters by Bali Kaur Jaswal. I love this author. One of my favorite books ever is by this author, and that book is Erotic Stories for Punjabi Widows. She is a South Asian woman living in Singapore, South Asian British living in Singapore, and I've also interviewed her for my podcast. Like, I love her work. I was very excited to pick this book up, but now I've tried to read this book 2 different times. Okay, this has been like sitting on my currently reading shelf for like years, but I can't get past like the halfway point. This is a story about 3 British Indian women living in England. Their mom passes away, and her final wish is for her 3 daughters to go to India to disperse her ashes and experience India in the way that she had, so they can feel connected to their roots. Excellent premise. Sounds amazing. Sounds like sisterhood, travel, navigating culture, family dynamics, like family drama. It has all the elements that I usually like, but there's just something about it. I was not invested in the characters. They just got really boring for me. They got like not relatable, and I hate to say this, but I wish the plot moved a little bit faster. I was not happy with the pacing either. I still love this author. I still recommend her books, but this one was not it for me. Right, next up, I read Vaishnavi Patel's newest book. This is Goddess of the River. This just came out a couple months ago. This is the same author who wrote KK, who I've spoken about a lot. This is a retelling of the Hindu epic Mahabharata from the perspective of the goddess Ganga. And you know what? With the other one, with KK, I knew a little bit going in of the epic. And here, I had no idea of her perspective and like her story in the larger epic. And this was such an amazing retelling. I really enjoy retellings, whether they're historical or mythological. And if you do, you were really gonna like this as well. There is an element of fantasy in here as well, like there was in the first one, but it's not intense fantasy with a lot of world building or anything like that. It's really quite minimal, and it does not overshadow the plot at all. I think retellings are perfect really for any time, but especially amazing and perfect for the fall time and the winter time, like cozy weather. So if you're looking for a new retelling, I would highly recommend this. It looks like a big book, but honestly, Vaishnavi Patel's writing is like butter, smooth. Like you just sail through, and before you know it, you're like halfway through. And she did not disappoint. I was a bit skeptical just with like sequels or with second book in the same category by the same author. Usually to me, I'm a bit skeptical, is it going to be as good as the first one? But this was great. Really, really great. Highly recommend. All right. After that, I read The Ministry of Time by Kayleen Bradley. This has been really famous on BookTube and Book Talk. This is a literary fiction, and Haley Pham on YouTube has like spoken really, really highly about it. So I picked it up, and I have sort of mixed feelings about this book. I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. Ministry of Time is about our main character. She lives in London, England, and basically the government of London or the government of England has figured out time travel. So there's a ministry of time. Now it's a super secret project. Nobody, like the lay people, the public, the world doesn't really know about it. And what they do is they rescue people from the past at any point in the past, like hundreds of years ago, who would have otherwise died, and giving them sort of like a new life in today's world and century. And so they take these people, they pluck them literally from like the circumstance before they were going to die, and then they rehabilitate them in today's society. So you have a lovely cast of characters. You've got somebody from the 1800s, from the 1600s, from like the early 1900s, from 1700s. So that was super intriguing. I absolutely loved the concept. And there's a bit of romance in here too, because our main character, she's one of these like rehabilitation like specialists. So she gets assigned to a guy who was taken from 1800s, from that shipwreck, the real actual shipwreck that happened in the Arctic. And a ton of people who went on expedition perished and their bodies were never found. You can look it up. It was one of England's ships. So the author actually took a real life person from that time and based the whole story around him and him being rescued, which I thought was super cool. You know, anything to do with like history is incredible for me. So really exciting and intriguing plot. So the main character and her rescue, like they start living together, and then, you know, she's showing him how the 21st century works and cell phones and whatnot and cooking and things like that. So it was really lovely. I will say there was a really great mystery element to it too, but after some time, and I think it was around the 40-50% mark for me, maybe 40%, that it just got a little dry. It got a little dry. And I think this, like the government politics and the ministry politics and stuff really made it dry for me. So I think that's something that people really love about this book. I didn't, unfortunately. I liked the history element. I liked the overall concept. I just wish there was a little bit less espionage in it. But personal opinion. All right, next up, I reread properly and finished Babel by R.F. Kuang. I got this last year when it was new and it was all the rage. I read it. I don't think I finished it properly, but I read it and I enjoyed it, but I wanted to come back to it properly. And I did. I actually properly, fully read it, really immersed myself in the story. I listened to the audiobook as well, and it was incredible. Like, Babel is 5 stars. The hype is so real about this book. It is chunky, and it's definitely a layered high fantasy. Well, it's not high fantasy. It's definitely layered, and there is a lot of fantasy in here, but this is set in our world, in Regency era or Victorian era England. And no, Regency era, so early 1800s England. This is about our main character, who is a boy in China who gets rescued by this professor who brings him back to England, gives him a new Anglican name, gives him a new identity, and tells him, you know what, I'm going to pay for you to go to Oxford. You have to live with me and study. All of it seems really kind of like idyllic, and then he makes it to Oxford. He grows up, makes it to Oxford, and he gets admitted to Babel. So Oxford is real, but Babel, the Tower of Babel, is not real. It's made up by the author. And this is a translation center. So it turns out Babel is where all of these scholars take value texts from all these countries that have been colonized by the British, translate them to English to better use silver. Silver is the metal in this book that has a lot of magic associated with it, a lot of power associated with it. And R.F. Kuang is a really lovely way to kind of show the evils of colonization and how colonization has been a vessel to, in the book, to rob people of their cultures, and not only rob them of it, but to now take it and to manipulate it and to use it as a weapon against these other countries, and also for their own personal benefit. So there's a huge narrative around colonialism and generational trauma and colonial trauma. If you are a person of color, you might particularly enjoy this. You may find parts of it relatable. And even if you're not a person of color or who has ancestral roots in places that have been colonized, you should still really, really read this. It's lovely. And so that's sort of like the setup for the book. And then from there on, it goes to them protesting and revolting against that and what that looks like. I'm not going to tell you more. I will say, look up some trigger warnings, but go into this book as blind as you possibly can, because every twist and turn is so amazing and mind-blowing, and it just really captures all of your attention. And I think this book really does deserve the hype. The ending, man, the ending was tough. I will say, I'm not going to say anything more about it, but the ending was tough for me. This book left me shaken in a good way, and you can really feel the characters' emotions and their injustice and their rage really kind of come through. A lovely cast of BIPOC characters, and you've got some gender diversity here too, especially given that it's set in Regency era, but incredible. Like, this actually deserves all the hype that it's gotten. Like, R.F. Kuang is a genius. All right, next up I read another 5-star book, and that was A Stationery Shop by Marjan Kamali. This is the same author who wrote The Line Women of Tehran, and I read that one first. You'll probably have seen it in like my May video or my April video, but Stationery Shop was incredible. I know what the hype is about now. I give it 5 stars. This is such a lovely coming of age and romance story set in, what is it, like 1950s, 1960s Iran, around that time of political upheaval in Iran's history. And so there is a lot of like political turmoil. If that's a trigger for you, then just be cognizant of that going into this book. But oh man, this book was so fast paced. It was beautifully written. Again, Marjan Kamali, her writing is again very smooth like butter. Like, you sit down to read and next thing you know, like you're like 10 chapters in. You don't notice the time flying with this book. So if you're looking for like a fast read but that is still impactful, I would pick this one up. It's about these 2 teenagers who are navigating, life, and then there's a whole political upheaval in Iran that happens, how it impacts them, how it impacts their choices that they make. And it's also set around the stationery shop. It's like the focal point of the plot. And one, I thought that was such a lovely touch. It feels very bookish, to have a story set around a bookstore and a stationery store. It starts off in the present day, and then we sort of time travel back to the character as she's reminiscing about what actually happened between her and our other main character. And the last book that I finished in August was The Princess and the Grilled Cheese Sandwich by Dea Muniz. This is another graphic novel, and oh my gosh, this was so adorable. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars as well. After I read Heartstopper, quite a bunch of graphic novels came up for me on my Goodreads profile as recommendations, and this was such a beautiful graphic novel. You have to read it. The title can sound very juvenile and childish, but it has lovely themes of, again, like navigating like your sexuality, your identity, and it is set in like a fantasy world where you have, well, not fantasy, but it's set in an older time where you have, an earl and a duke and a princess and kings and stuff. This was really nice, and I loved how the whole kingdom is based on cheese. So you have the kingdom of fromage. Is hilarious, and you have different lords and ladies with like different names that are associated with cheese. That was a really cute detail, but it's beautifully illustrated. Like, my gosh, like this author is so talented, and the story was also really lovely. Give it a chance. It's not cringe, or it's not as superficial as maybe you might expect it to be going into it, but I had a great time. We've also got a princess who has a great sense of fashion and like a greater sense of activism, and a main male character is also very intriguing. I'm just gonna put it at that, but give this a shot. Okay, that's it, folks. Those are all the books I read in the summer. I'm not going to go into the books I read in September because we're going to be here forever. It's already like 46 minutes of filming this. But thank you so much for watching. Thanks so much for being here and coming back on this channel. I'm hoping to now connect with you a little bit more regularly now that the summer is over. And I will be back soon with a video on fall reads and some reads for the spooky season. Thanks for being here. If you haven't already, please click like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.